See, I don't even care that's going. Okay, so I'm going to try and ignore that thing, but I was asked to kind of facilitate discussion more than give an in-service, and I think that makes me feel better about what we're doing, because I think then it would be more interactive if we look at it upon something that we're all doing and need to do and would like to perhaps do better. So from that, I certainly am not the expert in it. In fact, we have incorporated threaded discussions into our curriculum and into our coursework because we pretty much have had to, like everyone else. We've tried to make it a positive thing, and I think for the most part it has lent itself to some good interaction that wasn't always there on specific concepts in our field of occupational therapy. So what led to this was the continual discussions that have come up about threaded discussions, how to use them, what are we all supposed to be doing about them. So that's kind of where I'd like to start, to just review, because I think that there is a great big misunderstanding about the requirements about threaded discussion. So if I could start there, if it's redundant to you, then be really, really happy that you understand it that well. But this has come from the new attendance policy that is out there, and that allows students the ability to have some academic activity when life happens. It's not necessarily their attendance for the week, and nor should it be used. Those words should not be used for this. They still need to be in class. What threaded discussion allows, and the requirement, the weekly requirement of a threaded discussion allows, is that that student would have academic activity. Those are the words that we use, academic activity. With having academic activity in a week, if life happens to that student, they're not dropped from Brown Mackie, which can impact them greatly with financial aid and their current status in a program, all kinds of things. So we want to, at all costs, really acknowledge that life can happen, things can happen, aside from them that's simply not coming to class. We understand there are students that don't come to class and are at their own detriment. But this scenario is really to ensure that, that their status with the school is maintained, and that we then can look into the reason why perhaps they didn't come to class. So it allows a little time, it allows them to preserve their status. So I think first and foremost, my concern out there was that, that so many people misunderstood that, and that they really looked upon this as something that was like giving them attendance, and that certainly is not the situation at all. So with that understanding, we need to understand then that the academic activity, which we've said enough, but then we also need to understand the concept of academic significance. Okay, that's the other thing that currently is kind of ebbing at a lot of us. How do we make this threaded discussion so that it has academic significance? And that requires the instructor to look at their course for the month and go, you know what, is there a great YouTube that I usually show during the month, or is there an article that, you know, never gets quite read the way I like it to be read and discussed, that maybe if I put it out there using media, we could kind of all discuss it on kind of off time. This allows for some of those things. That's kind of how we've used it. Some of the evaluations, and I'll just use my own farm as an example. Some of our evaluations in occupational therapy we don't get to. You know, we have a lot to cover, and those take time. So this has allowed a lot of therapists are out on YouTube doing these different evaluations for children or on adult populations or whatever, and it's allowed us to give the student a copy of the evaluation and then this threaded discussion that shows maybe a YouTube of a therapist doing it, and they're able to kind of make that connection as to how that assessment would be done and what the value is, and then an actual therapist commenting on how a client of theirs is doing or what they wrote their summary about. And it has been very, very helpful in some of these classes that are really, it's important to know how we assess and how we come to treatment, but also these assessments are on their national exam when they get done. So I'm hoping that it will help them. So there's different ways to address this threaded discussion to give it academic significance. What it shouldn't be is just a quick answer out there, okay? Otherwise, it would take away from what it needs to be. Now, the only guidelines, really, it's kind of left up to the instructor to decide how to meet that criteria within the month. The threaded discussions need to be weekly, and they need to be 25 points. Some instructors were giving lots of points to threaded discussions, and some giving less than 25. The school as a whole, as a group, as an academic group, we've decided that each course should have 4 threaded discussions, 1 per week, each of those being 25 points. So out of the 1,000 for the entire month that each course is based on, 100 of them should be based from this threaded discussion. That everyone needs to kind of get, because we've noticed as we've kind of done some attendance things that some are putting more points and some less. So that's an easy fix. Just understand that each one needs to be 25 points and there needs to be 4. Okay? The thing that also gave some confusion was that some people were having students email or Dropbox. It needs to be on a threaded discussion format. That makes it accessible, number one, but also easily printed, and it has a recorded thing right there in eCollege. So there's lots of different ways that we enter assignments, Dropbox and otherwise, and accept assignments. Sometimes an email works when they couldn't have access to eCollege or whatever the circumstance. But in this case, to prove or to show academic activity, they need to do it through the threaded discussion. Okay? So those are the things that don't have give. The number of points and the medium. Okay? And is there a question? Sorry?
A comment maybe, but would rather be off record with it rather than have it part of the video.
Okay, well why didn't you do that then?
Okay.
Sure. So if if we have that understanding, it's 100 out of 1,000. Okay, not enough to make them pass or whatever, but enough to say, hey, there's points there. And a 90% brings, if they didn't do it at all, that's where they'd be to start out the month. The thing that they've added that has caused some confusion is what they're calling a final assessment. And there's not a give on either. We need to include a final assessment. So let's talk about what final assessment is not. It's not the final exam. Okay, the final exam occurs in the classroom. The student must sit for the final exam to take the final exam. That's not what a final assessment is. What it means is that there's a means that the instructor has created or uses to kind of provide a summation of the month that the student would do. It doesn't have to have points to it. It just has to be there. That allows the grade to not go with a, is it WF? Oh boy. UF. Yeah. There's a new classification you don't want. Anyway, sorry about that. It is, that is the difference. When you don't have a final assessment, it doesn't allow for the better classification. Let's just go there. That sounds pretty good. So a final assessment can be a question asking for the student to summarize 3 things that they learned in the class. It can be an open-ended thing that makes the student kind of come into the class, you know, in a way to summarize it, to point out 3 things they learned, to identify or maybe even define a few terms. Maybe you list some terms and they have to define 5 of them. You can make it whatever. It's lighter. It's just basically that it's called a final assessment. Yep.
Cindy, can you point out when did this come up? Because I got an email on this yesterday, that's the first I ever heard of it, and I have no clue what you're really talking about.
Yeah.
Because I'm an academic, I'm accounting, so we always have a final exam and all
Yeah.
that.
And
So what
we do
is it?
too. And we have a final exam in the classroom. This isn't that.
Right.
The way that it was explained, and the chairs just learned about it at that, really, the last week was like, kind of like,
So
okay,
it's
this
just
has to be
like
occurring,
in-class.
and it wasn't. So the timing of this in-service is good, because we haven't been doing that consistently. I assumed it was the final eval, or
I've never
final
heard of it,
test,
so
final
I guess my
exam.
question is
Okay.
there anything been sent out to say, tell us about this? Because
It's
it's
part,
very brand new to
yeah,
me.
yeah, and I get it. It's on the policy, I can tell you that, but it was on the fine print of the policy.
Which policy?
Well, I don't know if that was, you know,
Okay.
so,
I mean, is it in the syllabus that we have?
no. No.
Okay.
This is all new from the attendance policy. So,
Okay.
the people
That's
that
what I didn't know.
generated that, then generated that, and generated that.
Oh.
And so you know how things go. So, if we're looking at that, what is the purpose? If you can find the purpose in it, then you could perhaps find the way to do it. That's how I look at it. So what I did, was create this very generic thing, but I'm very visual, okay? So I'm thinking maybe half of you are visual. So what has to happen in a month? Let's just go there. Maybe you can make sense of it with me. When a student doesn't attend class, we depend on the threaded discussion for academic